Hi boys and girls. The first part of this video will be a bit of a review. Pay attention to how the lady breaks down the larger square into smaller ones to find the area. So cool.
In this lesson, you will learn to find the area of a rectangle by making a connection between area and arrays. You know that area is the space inside a closed shape. We find the area of a shape by counting the square units that fit inside it. You also know that an array is a way to visually represent a multiplication expression. One factor is the number of rows, and the other factor is the number of dots or marks in a row. You can see in this rectangle that 18 unit squares fit inside it. Therefore, it has an area of 18 square units. What if I put a dot inside each square? One dot to represent each square, and then took the squares away. I'm left with an array of 18. It is made of 3 rows with 6 dots in each row. Let's look at our rectangle again. Our rectangle has 3 rows of squares as well, and 6 squares in a row. 3 times 6 equals 18. 3 units by 6 units equals 18 square units. We can make an array to represent the area of any rectangle, which means we can also represent the area with the same multiplication equation as we use for an array. The number of rows of squares times the number of squares in a row will equal the area. Sometimes you are given a rectangle without squares inside, but you are told the length and width of the rectangle, 8 centimeters by 4 centimeters. That means that the rectangle is filled with squares that are 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. So the length of 4 centimeters actually means 4 square centimeters long and 8 square centimeters wide. So the area can be found just like we would find the number of dots in an array by multiplying 4 centimeters times 8 centimeters to get 32 square centimeters. Let's see how this works in a problem. What is the area of the rectangle below? Rather than sitting here and counting the number of square units, I can think of this rectangle as an array of dots. There are 7 rows and 12 squares in a row. If this were an array, I would call it a 7 by 12 array. So to solve the area, I will multiply 7 times 12 to find out how many unit squares are in this rectangle. I can make the multiplication easier by applying the distributive property. 7 times 10 equals 70, plus 7 times 2 equals 14. So there are 84 unit squares in this rectangle. The rectangle has an area of 84 square units. So now you know how to find the area of a rectangle by making a connection between area and arrays.
So that's pretty cool and easy. We can find the area of a larger rectangle by simply breaking it into 2 smaller rectangles. Okay. Just like we did when we were solving multiplication calculations like, remember 7 or 6 times 7? We would break this into 6 times 5, which equals 30, and 6 times 2, which equals 12, because 6 times 5 and 6 times 2 are pretty easy for us to calculate. Then we'd add those products together. 30 plus 12 equals 42. So 6 times 7 must be 42. Math is awesome!
In this lesson, you are going to learn how to use the distributive property by using area models. You already know that when we multiply whole numbers, we are combining equal groups. You also know we can use an area model to help us show and solve multiplication problems. For example, if we have the problem 8 times 7, it means we have 8 groups of 7. We can show this by using an area model that is 8 rows with 7 square units in each row. We can find the product to 8 times 7 by counting the total number of square units inside the rectangle. We see that there are 56 total square units inside our rectangle. So the product of 8 times 7 is 56. I'm going to show you how we can use the distributive property by using area models. Let's take our same area model for 8 times 7. If we want, we can make this into an easier problem with smaller numbers. We can break apart the 7 into 5 plus 2, since 5 plus 2 is 7. Now we can think of our problem as 8 times 5 plus 2. We can show this on our area model by breaking it into two smaller rectangles. Our first rectangle will still have 8 rows, but there will be 5 square units in each row. Our second rectangle will also have 8 rows, but there will be 2 square units in each row. We can solve this by finding how many total square units are in each rectangle. So we know that 8 rows of 5, or 8 times 5, gives us 40, and 8 rows of 2, or 8 times 2, gives us 16. Now, since we broke apart our rectangle into two smaller pieces, we need to combine them by adding them. So we know that 40 plus 16 will give us a sum of 56. That means 8 times 5 plus 2 equals 56. Notice this is the same answer we got when we multiplied 8 times 7. 8 times 7 is equivalent, or the same, as 8 times 5 plus 2, because both of these problems will result in the same answer. When we multiply both the 5 and the 2 by the 8, we call this the distributive property because we are distributing or multiplying both numbers in our parentheses by the 8.
Now, don't worry if that seemed a little confusing. It's really not. All that we really need to understand is that we can break larger rectangles into smaller ones to find the area, just like we broke larger multiplication calculations into smaller ones to find the product. Now, let's try using this information. Here I am, boys and girls, back in Braining Camp. I'm on the grid paper here in the geoboard, and I've created this rectangle. I want to see if I can use some of that information that we just saw in the video to find the area of this rectangle. As you can see, this rectangle has a length here of 12 units and a width of 8. So knowing that, I can use multiplication to find out how many squares there are inside this rectangle. I could use 8 rows of 12, or 8 times 12. 8 times 12? Ah! I don't know what 8 times 12 is. That's too big. It's crazy. What am I going to do? Oh, whoa, 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 whoa. I know what I'm going to do. How about breaking this rectangle into some smaller rectangles? Here, let me grab a green band over here. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look for some friendly numbers, and I know I can times 10. So anything times 10 is an easy calculation. So let me just divide it off over here. All right, now I've divided this larger rectangle into two smaller rectangles. Do you see them? I got this one here, scribbling in the green. I have this green rectangle over here, which I have reduced to an 10 unit long by 8 unit long rectangle. So the area for that rectangle would be 8 rows with 10 in each row. So it would be 8 times 10. Well, that's an easy one. I just put the 8 and add the 0. So 8 times 10 is, yeah, you got it. You're ahead of me, I know. It's a little slow trying to use this pen on this computer, but I'm getting there. 80. There we go. So that rectangle, that green rectangle here has a square unit measurement of 80. So 80 square units there. All right, how about this rectangle here? This one in here, I'm just going to kind of color it in a little bit. I wish they had a tool here where they just color the whole thing, but they don't, so there it is. Now, how many units do I have in width for this rectangle? Well, I only have the 2. 1, 2. So it's 8 units long, so there's 8 rows, but now there's only 2 in each row. So what's 8 times 2? There we go. What's 8 times 2, Karsten? Well, that's an easy one for you. It's a double. Yeah, I know. Too easy. Gotta find some challenging calculations for you, Karsten. All right, there we go. 8 times 2 is 16. Now, to find the total area of the larger rectangle, all I have to do is add the area of this green rectangle to the area of this black rectangle. So 80 plus 16, 96. And of course, I would put on my units. So the total area would be 96 square units. That is awesome. I can take those bigger calculations, make them smaller, use some friendly numbers like tens and doubles, and quickly and efficiently find the area of that large rectangle. Check out your math post because we're going to try some of these today.